Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And here at the end of December, I'm here with my good friends Mark and Pete. What's up, gentlemen?
Happy holidays, guys.
Happy holidays. Before we jump in, I just want to give a quick shout out. We haven't talked about that in a while, but we have more and more of our Unicorn Society members using a platform these days called Kilo. And so I just want to talk briefly about it because they're good friends of ours, and they actually, offer great discount to anyone who's a listener of the podcast or a member of our Unicorn Society. And so, Fisher, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what Kilo does real quick?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to describe it is they build websites, but not only do they build websites, but they build a lot of plug and play back-end automations. So literally in the past week, I have sent, I think, 3 Unicorn Society members there to check out their website, because I think a pain point that we see with a lot of our gym owners are it can be difficult and expensive and annoying to either design your own website, which you should not be doing, or to work with individuals that are in some cases very well-meaning website developers that don't really understand our business. So what's great is if you're working with Kilo, you get a website that's built to spec by individuals that have a lot of data, that understands what's working now, what works in the fitness industry. And frankly, selfishly, it makes my life a lot easier if I'm coaching you, because I know I can just send you to them and they're going to do good stuff. And because it's a very affordable monthly price, it's kind of a no-brainer rather than trying to build your own website. And I guess you could read StoryBrand and try to figure out it all on your own. I personally would prefer just to save for a shortcut. So for a lot of people, that's going to be the biggest thing. But again, I'll say in briefly, if you work with them, you also have access to some very helpful back-end automations to follow up with these leads. So now if you're getting more leads and your website is converting and you're getting people to raise their hand and express interest in what you're offering, you have to follow up with them. But now you can get out of being buried in a sea of Google Sheets, and you can also use some automations that they'll help build for you to make sure that you're not trying to figure out all the stuff on your own, knitting everything together with a bunch of zaps, which you can do, but it's just annoying. So Kilo, they make things less annoying.
That's it. Making running a gym less annoying. That should be their tagline. Yeah. So, dear listeners, if you are currently duct taping together different pieces of software to run your website and to follow up with your leads and to text your leads and to email people, go to usekilo.com, check them out. A lot of our members are using them and saying great things. So go check them out in the new year and save yourself some stress. Diving into today's topic, since it's the end of the year, I thought we would all talk a little bit about some of the things we like to do at the end of a year to prepare for the next year. So we'll call this kind of like annual planning. And we're not going to go through all of our whole annual planning process, but I thought we'd at least just have a conversation about what are the kind of tried and true things that we like to do in our businesses towards the end of the year to really kind of prepare ourselves to start kicking ass in January. Who has some thoughts? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first since I didn't speak about Kilo if you want.
Yeah, go for
Pete,
it. You're up.
Since you didn't give me a shot on Kilo, I will tell you, and I'm not a user of theirs. Sorry, John. I believe in it. The last 2 times I have asked a Unicorn Society member, or I complimented them on their website. I was like, you clearly read StoryBrand. And they were like, nah, I didn't. I just pay for Kilo. And each time I've been like, well, what do you pay? And they tell me, Kilo is underpriced. That's what I'll tell you. I'll leave that there.
Yeah. Get in now.
Now, and beyond that pitch, I want to start by saying we run kind of a fiscal year that is modified to match with the baseball calendar. So I don't really think of the new year as a new beginning for us, because it's really the home stretch for me. It's where we are trying to make sure clients are continuing to optimize their training experience all the way up till late February, early March, at which point we become a ghost town. And our clients disappear for a period while they compete in the sport that they've spent the whole winter preparing for. And we see them in some capacity, not as frequently as we do during this peak period. But then they all come back sometime in mid to late May. And that is my new year. That's how I think of it. That's when we reset. That's when we need to be ready to sprint. And so we have conversations of this nature as we come out of the busy season, and we have this, say, 10 to 12 week window to get our heads around how we're going to crush it in the summer. And the mistake that I see some gym owners making, and we've made this in the past, is instead of doing like a pre-mortem, which I once watched I think I talked on a podcast about watching Fisher and Brian Patrick Murphy do one of these, where I actually stumbled upon an office where the two of them were crying and embracing because they had murdered MFF during a pre-mortem. They don't often have a conversation about how we are going to sustain, or I would say manage growth if we crush our objectives. And so an example for us would be, what if we're really effective in enrolling our college summer program to the point where we actually don't have, say, the pitching coaches to support it the way that it deserves based on the price point? Sure, we'll have the cash flow to hire that person, but who the hell is that person? And can we afford to be reactive in nature when that time comes? And so we do a lot of work, and by we, I mean John and I, mapping out who the hypothetical next hire would be if and when we are just swimming in opportunity but don't have enough bodies to sustain it or to service it. And I know that this sounds like a first world problem of sorts, but it's a problem that we create for ourselves annually, it seems, where it's like, all right, we were awesome at getting the word out. We were awesome at putting bodies in the gym. Now we don't have enough bodies to coach them. And I just hate this reactive, panicked move for throwing cash at people on short notice. So we're having conversations with people, even right now. If we hit this number and you happen to be free in the spring, what's it going to take to employ you? What do we need to budget? What do we need to make happen to get you through the doors to make sure that we are not turning away wonderful opportunity? And everybody, our listeners, I think, are doing a good job of planning their Q1 objectives, and they're setting those stretch goals. They maybe have those goals that they feel a little unattainable, but they may kill it. But my question for you is, what if you do? And can you afford to drop the ball on that experience and send unhappy users out into the world talking about how you underdelivered on something that you oversold? So my one piece of advice is ask yourself, what if we exceed expectations? Are we actually equipped to deliver on that experience in a way that's going to reflect well on the brand?
Yeah. Well said, Pete. I think that's awesome, because I think you're right. So much annual planning is meant to kind of minimize like the worst case scenario and plan for what if shit goes really poorly? What if the year sucks? And there's very little time often given to like, well, what if we crush it? What if things go above and beyond our expectations? What if we actually exceed our goals? Are we prepared for that? Or will that actually wind up being a negative because we're so ill prepared for it going well? Yeah. So I think that's a great one. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
And the scary thing about that negative is that you don't feel the sting of the consequences instantaneously.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's so easy for people to for retention figures to quietly be shitty when you are a world-class lead generator. But there are consequences further down the road for being creating something that's so good at putting bodies in the gym that it doesn't really hurt to see them not come back. But over time, it's like a lagging indicator of our failures in the past. And we need to put all of the energy we can into maintaining our reputation. And you underdeliver now, you have a bad reputation for a long time in somebody's eyes. And who knows who that person's going to end up becoming, be it in your field or in the field that you aspire to service. And it's just negligent.
Yeah.
Underserving people because we're so busy we don't have to care.
Yeah, great tip. What about you, Fisher? What's the kind of a go-to, have to do it at the end of each year to prepare for the next year kind of activity?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely, there's a lot of things, but the one that's coming to mind that I think everyone would benefit from doing is definitely going to feel like eating your vegetables for many of you, but I think that is doing your very best forecasting of revenue, as well as looking at what your forecasted expenses are and taking a real long look at what you are spending money on broken down by category. For a lot of your businesses, it's actually not that complicated. Again, MFF is this strange giant monster with all these different things going on. But I think that becomes a very important thing to understand. What are your projected margins? Certainly, it's really the only reasonable way. I'm not saying everyone does it, but it's the only reasonable way one can also understand what you can offer to your employees in line of raises. So I guess in practice, this for me, it's year-end-ish, but it's really more a November-ish task, because by the time we're in December, we're into annual check-ins. We want to understand what bucket we have available and what we're going to be able to offer to people. If I could offer one other thing that's maybe going to feel a little more fun and doesn't probably also need to be extravagant as MFF does it, but we've really invested a lot of time, energy, and we will be spending a lot of money on continuing education in this year ahead. It is shocking, I think, the amount of things that we have planned that are coming down the pike for virtually every member of our team, for our business team. We are going so in on continuing education. It is very we're really going to test this hypothesis that this is how you grow and develop your gym, or otherwise we're just spending a lot of money that maybe we'd hold on to anyway. But anybody that knows my work knows that I'm not shy about spending and investing time, energy, and money in education. And we have a lot of things we'll be doing this year, and maybe in a future podcast I can break that down a little bit, as people might be interested to know what we're focusing on as the MFF team.
Yeah, good one. Let's just go back maybe, and if you can unpack a little bit for those who are listening who maybe not done any forecasting before. Can you just break down a few just kind of basic steps for how you lay all that out? Because I know some people, they break out a spreadsheet and try and think about the whole year and all those numbers. That can be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
Can you just give maybe a few micro steps?
Yeah, I think at the highest level, it starts by understanding what's happened in the previous year. So depending on the way your P&Ls are structured, you can get a good sense, and not a perfect sense, because remember, P&L it's a tax stream. It's not like what's actually happening, but you can get a good sense from P&L of what the your main revenue streams. For most training gyms, it's only going to be a few. Understand how much money you made in each month for each of those revenue streams. And then you can start to forecast based on what you expect growth to be, to understand what this next year might look like, because many of our businesses, of course, seasonality. So it's important to not only consider your month-to-month growth that you like, but also be realistic about the seasonality. Most of us are going to have certain times of year where there's also going to be dips. So even if you have an amazing year, it's not usually going to be linear, where every month you're making a little bit more than the month prior. You can do the same thing for expenses. Now, expenses get a little bit chunkier depending on what it is you're buying. So it's sometimes a little bit harder to make those budgets, but it's something that's very important if you want to have a sense of how much money you're making, because you only get to keep what's from the revenue, what's left over after the expenses. And again, for most training gyms, that's going to be pretty simple. You're going to have your rent, your facility expenses, you're going to have staffing costs. And then whenever you're budgeting for extra things outside of that, you'll probably have some software as a services and some, you're building software, your platform, you'll have credit card processing dues. And then that's kind of it. And then you have education, of the others nice to have things that are good, but it's mostly facilities, staff, software, other stuff. And that actually might even be the biggest. It might be a little too a little too high level for some of you, but for some of you, that's probably actually all you need to understand.
It's a great start. I think the things that people forget about when they're doing forecasting, especially on the expense side, is the stuff that they don't pay for every month. It's that piece of software you pay for once a year. It's that insurance payment that comes through once every 18 months, right? It's like, that's the stuff that sneaks up when you're like, oh, wait, fuck, I owe $5,000 the insurance that's on February 3rd. It's that random stuff that's really important to get in front of, because, they make or break your budget some months.
Yep.
Yeah. Great tips, Fisher. Yeah, I think that's really awesome. What I would share is, when people do forecasting, they immediately jump into future thinking. And I maybe somewhat counterintuitively think that the first step to forecasting is backwards glancing, right? And you, I think, hinted at this a little bit, Fisher, and talk about finances, is you have to look at what happened this last year before you start to hypothesize what's going to happen the next year. And I think this is true in other areas of the business. So we often, when we do our annual planning at MFF, and subsequently now teach Unicorn Signing members to do this, we spend time looking backwards and being, this last year, what's all the great shit we did? Let's make a list of all the great things we do this quarterly as well. But I think it's also important to do it on the whole year, to look back and say, cumulatively, what are all the projects we finished? What are all the new things we created? What are the problems we solved? What are the things we fixed? Who are the clients we served? Really take a glance at all the great shit you did, and then look back and also say, okay, what are the lessons learned? What are the mistakes made, right? And there's not enough self-reflecting about the past experience in forecasting. Sometimes we just jump right into daydreaming and planning for the next year. But those plans, I think, are so much more successful and so much more grounded when they are based in your past, when they're based in your history. So I would say, if I'm going to be really specific about it, it's make a giant list of all the things that went well, all the things you crushed, and your team can do this separately and then come together and share. And then your team should also make a giant list of things you fucked up, balls you dropped, lessons learned from those balls you dropped, things you wish you could, do-overs you wish you could have, regrets that you're carrying with you, right? And take all of that information and let those two lists inform what you're going to do in the next year, because that's what learning looks like. Right? And so often we skip that step. We just assume that all of that is somewhere in us and it's going to come out in the forecasting, but it's not. If we don't take time to really unpack it and bring those memories back up to the surface, they're not going to be available to us for when we're doing planning for the next year. So it's very simple, but I think it makes a big difference. I know, Fisher, you would agree. I know we've been doing that for a while.
Totally.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing based on your two pieces?
Yeah, please.
One of the most common pieces or concepts that are discussed in the coaching calls I do with the group are announcing and executing on pricing increases. And both of the things you guys have brought up are the fuel that needs to be illustrated in communicating with your community when it comes time to explain and justify a pricing increase. Because all of the people who are wavering on increasing their prices because they're worried about how it's going to be received in their community, that's a pretty good indicator of the fact that they're raising their prices because they have to, not because they're greedy. The fact that they have this like anxiety around it. And they need to just say to the community, just so you know, this is the way our cost structure has increased. Just so you know, this is the way we've invested in improving your client experience. The former is Mark's point and the latter is Keeler's point. And it's an important exercise, if nothing else, for that reason, because you should be raising prices probably in the coming year at some point, unless you did in the last 6 months. And so that's it's +1 on both of your concepts.
Yeah, it's a great point, Pete. Even in the template that we give Unicorn Study members for how to communicate your raising of your rates, we actually encourage people to list the improvements you've made. Like, tell people, how have you improved their experience as a client over the last year? And so doing that exercise with your team means you're ready for that. I think it's a great connection, Pete. It's a great connection.
I would just briefly plug, anybody wants to learn more about that, video just went live. If you go to markfisheryoutube.com, as of this recording, I just dropped the video with the shares most of our framework for how to raise your prices. And if you're interested in actually even getting access to the template, the actual words that we use, if you shoot me an email at mark@businessforunicorns.com, I can share with you an actual script so you don't have to make it up from scratch.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Well, let's leave it there, my friends. I think that those three things are great exercises for all our listeners to do as they're getting to the end of their year, assuming that this is the end of their actual calendar year, their seasonal year. But thanks for doing this. This was a great conversation. And if listeners, you want more content like this, let us know. Email us, Michael, Mark, Pete @businessforunicorns.com. Shoot us an email, let us know, and leave us a 5-star review everywhere you listen to your podcast so more and more cool people can find this shit. Awesome, gents. Thanks for a great chat. We'll talk again soon.
Good talk, guys.